In the realm of ancient Greece, there is a cave where shadows craft a surrogate reality. 380 BC. A group of individuals are shackled in this cave from birth, watching the shadows on the wall. These silhouettes, cast by objects passing before a fire, are the only world they know. One day, a man breaks free from his chains. Crawling through the confining passages, he emerges into the blinding daylight. For the first time, he sees the sun and the rest of the world as it truly is. He sees olive trees, temples, sculptures, markets, soldiers, ships, chariots, vineyards, Mount Olympus, sacrifices to the gods, feta cheese, pottery, and inappropriate relationships between adults and children. Lots of inappropriate relationships between adults and children. The man returns to the cave. He tries to enlighten his peers about the world outside, but as they are accustomed only to the dim shadows, they find his stories of sunlight and vibrant landscapes unbelievable. To them, he seems deluded, blinded by what they perceive as overwhelming and nonsensical. They refuse to acknowledge the possibility of a world beyond their shadows, clinging to their familiar, albeit limited, perception. Then a rock and some gravel fell on them, and they all died.
What up? What's the matter, Pegasus? Got your tongue? Maybe it's my toga. You like that shit? Let me give you a little twirl, see what you think. Not your typical philosopher's attire, I'll grant you that. And you know what they say, if you got it, flaunt it, and I got it. Plato, who wrote the original Man in Cave long before the Wachowskis plagiarized it, has been revered through the ages, hailed as a paragon of intellect. But Plato was, and is, a punk-ass, pansy-ass, elitist little bitch. He claimed that society was only just when the masses were deemed too ignorant to participate in governance. That was the job of the philosopher kings. Plato's Republic has been a subject of reverence, scholarly intrigue, and debate for centuries. However, when we critically examine its contents, we find that it's a far cry from the ideal egalitarian or democratic society that contemporary values champion. It outlines a world where a very select few make decisions for everyone, justified by the idea they are the most fit to do so. Plato's elite weren't just in charge either. They were supposedly the guardians of truth and the sole proprietors of wisdom. Sounds very noble, right? I mean, until you realize that the knowledge wasn't for sharing. The common folk were expected to stay in their little cave corner, playing with shadows while the philosopher kings debated each other up in their ivory towers of truth. And, oh, they were master debaters, real throat goats. Which sounds eerily similar to the world we find ourselves in today, a world where the few own everything, dictate access to information, and make all the truly meaningful decisions. But to be fair, today's rulers don't wear goofy costumes that make them look ridiculous and impossible to take seriously. Oh, never mind. They do. My point was that they wield a similar influence, though, shaping perceptions and directing the flow of information. I mean, those costumes really do look stupid, though, don't they? They also got caught up in a big thing involving inappropriate relationships between adults and children a couple of years ago. But we're crazy if we talk about that too much. So just look at the flight logs and move on from it. Anyways, things get really interesting when we bring technology into the context of Plato being a bitch. With the rise of artificial intelligence, the lines blur. Who is the philosopher king now? Is it the programmer, the algorithm, or the machine itself? Well, it sure ain't the people cybering with Chat GPT and one of those pretend girlfriend apps. And yeah, I am 100% the person who gets to gloat about that, by the way. In 2011, I got catfished, and you people were all telling me I made up a girlfriend. But you're all just doing it now. Shadows on the wall, I tell ya. Anyways, it's time to take a step beyond the cave's dark, flickering illusions. This story is as old as Plato's cave, but it isn't just about what the shadows depict. It's about who started the fire.
People like to use this song to detail what's going on, but every single time they do, they always leave out me and you. Dropping names and big events, celebrities and influence, politics and its big tents, but can you afford rent? Power plays on the world stage, but you're stuck minimum wage. Credit card that loads to pay, got a degree or not. Feel like it would be good if you could get in a word, but the only place to do this social media's bullshit. We didn't start the fire, it was how we burned it since the world was turning. We didn't start the fire, no we didn't light it, but we tried to light it. Is it really useful to recount a bunch of stuff to you? Stuff I know you'll recognize, cause you see it with your eyes. This song's even more empty than mid-late night comedy. This song's not analytical, it's really just listicle. Data centers, privacy, finance, capital holds the keys. We argue creativity, hope that will get a shot. Hold the product logo out, cancel you to get some content, calling shots from luxury, think they're better than you and me. We didn't start the fire, it was always burning since the world been turning. We didn't start the fire, no we didn't light it, but we tried to light it. We didn't start the fire, it was always burning since the world been turning. We didn't start the fire, no we didn't light it, but we tried to light it.
Philosophy is the study of fundamental questions about knowledge, values, reason, and existence. The fundamental philosophical divide concerns the essence of reality, how we understand the world. The concept of idealism suggests that reality is mainly constructed in the mind or spirit, and that our thoughts and feelings are the basis of everything. In contrast, materialism argues that the physical world is the basis for everything, and that our knowledge stems from our experiences with it. Throughout history, philosophy has been considered the foundation of all knowledge, and those engaged in its study and practice are known as philosophers.
And you might be thinking from my apparel and the fact that I'm talking about philosophy that I fancy myself a philosopher, but I don't. I'm actually just a Marxist. But isn't Karl Marx a philosopher? Technically. Yeah, I guess I have to concede on that one. But Karl Marx kind of thought philosophy was bullshit.
Marx had a critical view of philosophy as it was traditionally understood because he saw it as detached from the real-world struggles of people's lives. For instance, a forerunner of anarchist theory, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, wrote a book called The Philosophy of Poverty. Taking the title literally suggests that a particular mindset or philosophical approach exists at the center of poverty. And indeed, the book focuses on conceptual and philosophical aspects rather than on practical observations of poverty's causes and effects. Marx wrote a response to Proudhon's book called The Poverty of Philosophy. This was a dunk on the idealism of Proudhon's theories, or what Marx sees as the shortcomings or poverty in his approach. Further, in Theses on Feuerbach, Marx even critiques the old materialist philosophies. He argues that they are too passive and abstract, basically another form of idealism in their failure to grasp the active role of human beings in shaping their world. He believed that traditional philosophical materialism just didn't account for the activities through which humans interact with and change their environment.
Put a little more bluntly, Marx kind of thought all previous philosophy was abstract nonsense, the work of a bunch of dumb bitches. But he also thought a guy named Hegel figured out the solution.
Marx was a young Hegelian, a student of Bruno Bauer, who was himself a student of philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel famously developed a method for seeing history as a process of conflicting forces called dialectics. As Marx's collaborator, Friedrich Engels, summarized,
Hegel has freed history from metaphysics. He made it dialectic, though his conception of history was essentially idealistic. But now idealism was driven from its last refuge, the philosophy of history. Now a materialistic treatment of history was propounded, and a method found of explaining man's knowing by his being, instead of, as heretofore, his being by his knowing.
Marx believed Hegel's idealism, his belief that human thought, knowing, preceded the material world, being, rendered his dialectical method upside down or ineffective. Still, he recognized value in Hegel's dialectics, where ideas and consciousness evolve through contradictions and resolutions. Marx sought to apply this process to the real world, arguing that it should address material conditions and social relations, grounding philosophical concepts in tangible human experiences and struggles.
And you're probably thinking, okay, none of this is about Plato. Why exactly are you dressed like an ancient Greek philosopher, except extremely attractive again? To talk about Marx? Well, you got me. Guilty as charged. You know those movies where you join in the middle of an important event and they freeze frame and they do the record scratch sound and the main character says, "That's me. I bet you're wondering how I got into this situation." Well, that's basically what I did here, except the main character isn't a rat that wants to be a chef. It's philosophy. What I'm saying is that you're gay for watching this.
Plato's era in ancient Greece is a world apart from when and where Marx and Hegel developed their ideas, both in time, about 2,300 years, and in context, industrialization. But his ideas were still influential then.
Hell, we still got a bunch of dummies repeating this nonsense. In fact, that's why I talked about Marx first. Marx, reacting against the kind of abstract thinking that could be traced back to Plato, brought the focus back to the real, the concrete, the tangible. You know, the not stupid.
Plato, on the other hand, believed that beyond our physical world, and preceding it for that matter, there exists a realm of perfect and unchanging ideas, or forms. He thought these forms were the true reality, more real than the objects we see and touch in our everyday world. For example, the concept of a perfect circle is more real in Plato's view than any drawn circle. This might sound lofty and profound, but it can lead to some pretty out-of-touch thinking.
Like that guy who endlessly talks about how much better his songs would be than that one band's if he could afford a better guitar. But how much better would his cooking really be if he had access to a state-of-the-art kitchen? Could he really put astronomers to shame if he just had a professional-grade telescope? Could he really make films that make Spielberg look less like an auteur and more like an amateur if he just had a better camera? Or maybe our hypothetical narcissistic do-nothing blowhard spends a bunch of time outlining exactly what the perfect political system would look like in a coffee shop while everyone else actually deals with everyday life. I don't know.
Philosophy has a seductive quality for some, drawing them into an endless contemplation of the perfect society or the true essence of things. This can trap people in a daydream or in debates on Twitch, missing the imperfect and beautiful reality right in front of us. This brings us back to Plato's famous allegory of the cave, a metaphor for human perception and knowledge. As explained in the introduction, Plato envisioned a cave where people are chained, facing a wall, seeing only shadows cast by objects behind them. For Plato, these objects represented the perceived reality of those in the cave, a reality far from the truth.
And the allegory of the cave sucks at what it's trying to do. Plato tells us that the tactile, physical world, the one we live in, is just an illusion, mere shadows on a cave wall. But then he says that the world of forms, this abstract realm of perfect ideas, is the real world. It's a bit of a head scratcher, right? Like, hey, the world as you know it is just a lie. It's just shadows on the wall. But here, let me use it as a symbol representing a truer world. His choice of comparison undermines his whole point. If our world is just an illusion, how can it simultaneously be a reliable reference for something more real?
Plato's Republic, where the allegory of the cave is found, advocates for society ruled by philosopher kings who have grasped the truth of these forms. According to Plato, this elite class is best suited to govern society because they understand these higher realities. Plato's concept of philosopher kings in the Republic exemplifies a precedent for rule by an elite class, a notion that is echoed throughout history. So the question is, how do we tell who is supposed to rule?
Well, the truly wise folks are supposed to rule. So basically, Plato is saying that Plato should be in charge, which gives me a whiff of Reddit atheism. It's the tinges. Whatever wine people do.
The notion that the truly wise should rule is a central tenet of Platonic elitism. Typically, wise is defined as having or showing experience, knowledge, and good judgment. But here's the catch. None of these qualities are entirely objective. Wisdom isn't just a collection of traits, it's a concept, an idea, and thus can be shaped, styled, or even romanticized to suit different narratives or agendas. This means that wisdom can be more than just a measure of intellect or experience. It can become an aesthetic, a carefully crafted image projected by those in power to maintain their status. In this way, the Platonic ideal of rule by the wise opens the door to subjective interpretations and manipulations, where wisdom can be used as a tool for justifying and upholding power structures rather than as a standard for leadership. This aesthetic of wisdom can be tailored to reflect the values and priorities of those in power. The philosopher kings are deemed wise for their understanding of the forms by whom?
Well, by Plato. But Plato was just some guy, and that was just like his opinion, man. The aesthetic of wisdom is subjective and thus flexible, and so it often has less to do with knowledge and experience and more to do with rhetoric and charisma. You know why you're still watching this, despite the fact I called you gay. I mean, it could even be because I called you gay, you homo. Obviously, I'm really damn wise.
In different historical contexts, this aesthetic of wisdom has been utilized in various ways. In feudal societies, wisdom was often associated with religious or spiritual knowledge, thus aligning with a divine right. The concept of divine right suggested that rulers were chosen by God due to their inherent wisdom or virtue, echoing Plato's idea of philosopher kings in a more theistic framework. In modern capitalism, this idea morphs into the belief that the market, an ostensibly impartial and rational mechanism, naturally elevates the most capable, efficient, or innovative individuals to positions of wealth and power. This might appear similar to Plato's idea of selecting rulers based on wisdom, only the criteria shift from philosophical wisdom to economic success, though the latter supposedly reflects the former. It's important to note that neither Plato's Republic nor capitalism actually select based on these criteria. In Plato's vision, wisdom was narrowly defined as more or less naturalized. Similarly, capitalism claims to reward economic success as a marker of ability and innovation, yet in practice, factors like inheritance, networking, market monopolies, and even luck play a more significant role. The self-made, merit-driven success story is more the exception than the rule, with the system frequently perpetuating existing power structures and wealth disparities. This is to say that subjective concepts like wisdom are malleable and can be employed to uphold the ruling order. Under the guise of rewarding wisdom or merit, these systems often perpetuate power structures that favor a select few, not necessarily because of their wisdom or virtue, but due to various other factors like birth, wealth, connections, or just plain exploitation.
I call the Republic a tool for justifying authority. And I mean it pretty literally. It is a book explaining why authority is just. And I'm not saying all authority of any kind is unjust. I'm saying we shouldn't just accept authority without question simply because it claims to be founded on wisdom or virtue, especially if it regards those things as inherent.
In Republic, Plato articulates justice as the will to fulfill the duties of one's position and not to meddle with the duties of another.
If I were to create a political party from scratch, it would be called the Mind Your Own Damn Business Party.
This means that people are just when they occupy their proper place in society, actively adhering to their roles. But what is their proper place? Well, according to Plato, one man should practice one thing only, the thing to which his nature was best adapted. And this brings us into the concept of natural law, the philosophical belief that certain rights, values, and truths are inherent in human nature, regardless of the norms of any specific society. When proponents of natural law are pressed for a basis for their thinking, it usually ends up with God or biology, which has some pretty dark implications.
Okay.
In the context of Plato's Republic, this idea is based on the belief that the universe has a pre-existing ideal order where each person being just, meaning in their proper place, contributes to societal harmony and the greater good, reflecting Plato's view that the universe operates according to a perfect and logical structure, ultimately realized in the realm of the forms.
The Republic wasn't just about philosopher kings and ideal forms, though. Plato's vision for a just society included some disturbing measures to ensure everyone stayed in their proper place.
In Plato's ideal society, those who deviate from their natural roles are seen to be disrupting the harmony of the state and, ultimately, of the universe. To prevent situations where people might step out of their proper place, he proposed measures like population control and a selective breeding program. These ideas, now recognized as eugenics, aimed at maintaining the purity of the philosopher kings because without that, he believed society would degenerate. Plato outlines a stationary state, ultimately advocating against growth. Society was to be small and remain that way because he believed that excessive growth in population or wealth would disrupt a society's delicate balance.
Plato's perfect state was a city-state conceived for a small, and so far as possible, constant number of citizens. As stationary as its population was to be its wealth.
This is why I'm bewildered that the LaRouche people like Plato so much. He basically is the original anti-growth overpopulation guy. And his philosophy is the string that connects it to eugenics so plainly. Like, this guy beat Malthus and Galton to the punch by several thousand years. This part of Plato's philosophy is often glossed over, but it's important. It shows that a just society, as Plato envisioned it, involves extreme practices in concern that the lessers might ruin it. Also, I don't know if you've ever tried to read it, but Plato's Republic is an absolute mess. I cited things rather than read them verbatim because they're written as Socratic dialogues, which are fictional conversations between Socrates, who was not Plato, and others, also not Plato, where the conversation is whatever Plato thinks it should be. It's like if I wrote a story about Karl Marx saying whatever I wanted him to say with genuinely no regard for if he said or would have said it. In other words, a lot like the contemporary left.
In Plato's ideal society, the guardian class isn't just educated to be the best, they're literally bred for it. The Republic outlines a tightly controlled reproduction program, selecting who gets to be a parent based on their qualities. The best people are matched to produce the best offspring, all managed and overseen by the state. This included establishing reproductive bureaucracy, restricting procreative activity to specific age ranges, and organizing deceptive lotteries billed as religious festivals to ensure that the best people are the ones reproducing.
I just want to be pure.
Plato's vision was a program for creating a superior class through selective breeding, deciding whose genes are worthy.
And when we talk about eugenic shit, things get dark pretty quick. The words master race rightfully come to mind. Now, I'm not saying that Plato was a Nazi. Nazis wouldn't happen for about 24 centuries, but I will say this armband, it's pretty damn ominous.
The Jewish doctrine of Marxism rejects the aristocratic principle of nature, and replaces the eternal privilege of power and strength by the mass of numbers and their dead weight.
Oof, got natural laws, a justification for an elite ruling class, denigration of the masses, and bonus for Hitler hating Marxism. It's almost like I brought Marx up for a reason, like I have some kind of consistent point or something.
Plato believes this is so important that it has to be reinforced at all costs. So he suggests what many call a noble lie to foster allegiance to the state and maintain social order. Plato's noble lie is referred to as the myth of the metals, where he suggests that people are born with a certain kind of metal in their soul, gold, silver, or bronze, which determines their position and role in society. Gold means the rulers, the philosopher kings, silver protects and upholds the law, and bronze means the producers, farmers, artisans, and laborers who provide for the material needs of the city. The metals are meant to justify rigid class structure, positing that social roles and hierarchy are innate and unchangeable, determined by one's very nature.
Again, it's necessary to mention that Plato believes that these classes reflect the natural order of the universe, but not because of soul metals. It's really kind of just because. Which, even though the soul metal thing is laughably dumb, it is at least a reason. Like, he knew he needed to explain, rather than just saying, it's just the way things are meant to be, don't question it.
Don't ask me questions! I'm not taking questions! The Golden God is not taking questions! I am the Golden God!
And we see tinges of his philosophy in modern society's obsession with meritocracy, where the cream supposedly rises to the top, but doesn't.
Because cream always rises to the
Yeah,
top.
dude, and you have so much cream inside you, man, and it's always getting up in Dennis's face.
Dennis hates my cream.
He hates that, dude, because it's like, it's all over him. And he can smell it on him, and it drives him nuts.
Yeah.
Because what is the cream is ultimately determined by the ruling class's material interests. And that might not be exactly the same thing today as it was yesterday, or tomorrow, for that matter. An ideal that marks someone as better than everyone else is subjective and ultimately flexible, therefore can function as a cover for perpetuating existing power structures. Meritocracy, for instance, is really a way of saying if you're not at the top, it's because you don't deserve to be. You haven't earned it. But saying these things doesn't make it so. It only makes it okay. And people are still doing it today. Looking at modern examples gets really interesting too, like the recent discussions around plagiarism sparked by a certain popular YouTuber.
On December 2nd, 2023, Harry Brewis, better known to YouTube as Hbomberguy, released a 4-hour video called Plagiarism and YouTube. In it, he explains plagiarism, why it's wrong, and its many side effects. Hbom articulates numerous examples, warning viewers that he might ruin some of their favorite YouTubers.
I could even ruin some of your favorite YouTubers for you. Apologies in advance. So, let's start some fights.
Yes, let's start some fights indeed.
This video isn't just a casual commentary, it's a meticulous cataloging of individual YouTubers who have been playing fast and loose with content that isn't theirs. For 4 long hours, Hbom lays out case after case of undercited, often entirely uncited reuse of material, effectively calling out what he views as a rampant disregard for originality and creativity.
In this crusade for intellectual honesty, Hbom positions himself as a defender of creative integrity, drawing a clear line between those who create and those who imitate.
And the source footage is clearly labeled, "Are they gay?" You had proven you plagiarized Avila before the video was even done. Also, delete your channel.
But it's his analysis of the plagiarist's motives that is of particular interest.
Why would you even do that? No, seriously, that's the question we're trying to explore here. Why do people plagiarize?
Hbom suggests that these YouTube plagiarists are empty, incomplete people. He claims money, prestige, clout. These aren't actually the driving forces, but instead he sees them as attempting to relieve a more existential problem in their life.
In a world that often feels directionless, where meaning and purpose are in short supply, Hbom says that seeing someone who appears to have it all figured out is compelling. He says plagiarism isn't just about wanting to emulate their success either. It's about trying to fill a void, a lack of completeness within the plagiarists.
Sure, in retrospect, a bunch of people wanting to be exactly like the AVGN sounds silly. But he knew who he was. He was the angriest gamer you've ever heard. We can laugh, in fact, you're supposed to. But that's a human being with purpose. There's someone who's not anxious about their place in the world anymore. It's very difficult not to want that completeness for yourself, not to just be like someone, but to be them, to attain that sense of knowing. In real life, James Rolfe is a human being with all sorts of problems and fears, but that doesn't stop people from wanting to be like the person he seems, someone who knows their place in the world.
I mean, I got this giant gaping hole inside me. Oh. I like to call it my God hole.
But you want to fill a pussy.
Yeah.
This is where it ties back to Plato and the Republic. Justice. Sounds unrelated, but stick with me. As I said before, to Plato, justice can be summarized as when everyone minds their own business and refrains from getting their nose in other people's affairs. There are various versions of Plato's definition due to translations and how the Republic is written as creative writing homework, specifically, like I said. You might hear to do one's own business and not be a busybody, or minding your own business and not interfering with other people. But I think author and professor John Patrick Coby clarifies it well.
Justice exists where there are interdependent parts, rightly related, with each part sticking to its own job, and with the collection of parts forming a purposeful whole.
Basically, Plato is saying, know your place, bitch. And people who have fulfilled their station are just the exemplars, the good ones. In our modern context, people often look to others who seem to have found their place and purpose, like a YouTuber with a clear identity and audience. And Hbom, a YouTuber with a clear identity and audience, says people plagiarize not because of systemic incentives and rewards, not because success and monetary gain come to those who produce interesting content at higher speeds than others, but because they kind of want to be him.
But I do worry there are people out there who will never get the chance to become who they are because they're too busy trying to be like someone else who, at best, has it figured out for themselves just a little bit. I feel like I know who I am and how to live my life, and that makes me feel happy and somewhat complete. And I don't think I'd have ever found myself if I was trying to chase someone else's sense of completeness. Basically, no one knows how to live your life. I know who I am and how to live my life. But the only person who's going to figure it out is you. And you won't find out by trying to be like someone, to be them.
Plato's justice was about everyone staying in their lane, and Hbom's critique can be seen as a contemporary application of this principle. At length, he objects to original ideas on YouTube being unapologetically seized by others, leading to a loss of authenticity and original thought, a decay of meaningful expression.
The mask has fallen and the gears of the mill spin naked before us as they wheel and crunch, all meaning to dust and Raid Shadow Legends sponsorships.
Though it's not likely how he thinks he sees plagiarists, Hbom stations them not just as rule breakers, but fully as disruptors of a natural order of creativity, expressing concern for preserving a particular order of truth and originality.
Delete your channel. In his Yuri on Ice video, he claimed the show never went into explicitly gay territory because it aired early in the evening on Japanese television, and there's a law on the books preventing showing homosexuality that early. This is a common myth made up by Western fans of the show to explain why it wasn't gayer. They wanted to, but it was illegal. How convenient. But that law doesn't work that way, and even if it did, Yuri on Ice aired at 2:30 AM in the morning, the gay witching hour. They could do whatever they wanted. But now I see people continuing to spread this lie, linking Summerton's video as proof it's true. James is helping to reinforce misinformation by not checking whatever he hears on Twitter before he spreads it, which is a bit concerning. I've seen James repeat a lie in his videos, and then other people claim it's true and link his video as the proof. He has helped to solidify misinformation by seeming like he's doing his diligence.
You see how some gay guy repeating shit he heard about a super gay anime that he thought could and should be gayer is eroding reality? Do you see it? He thinks it's such a problem, he had his producer crowdsource a naughty and nice list on his subreddit. Here, guys, a way to easily tell the real, original creative thinkers from the fakers. This will remain civil and normal for sure. But what is creativity? What is thinking?
In an article entitled The Decay of Classical Quotation, published in 1896, author and politician Herbert Woodfield Paul declared,
"And after all, what is originality? It is merely undetected plagiarism."
Austin Kleon's widely acclaimed 2012 book, Steal Like an Artist, however, credits the quote to William Ralph Inge, who stated it more simply in 1927 as, "What is originality? Undetected plagiarism." Though Inge himself expressed that he didn't come up with the quote, Kleon quotes him in support of his point that nothing is original.
What a good artist understands is that nothing comes from nowhere. All creative work builds on what came before. Nothing is completely original. Every new idea is just a mashup or a remix of one or more previous ideas.
Kleon's book delves into the heart of creativity, exploring how it often stems from reinterpreting and recombining existing ideas. This process is essential to artistic evolution. Innovation doesn't occur in a vacuum. It builds on absolutely every single thing that came before it. Kleon's perspective emphasizes the importance of drawing inspiration from various sources, viewing this not as theft, but as a continuation of the creative journey. By embracing the influences around us and adding our unique touch, we participate in the ongoing dialogue of art and ideas.
Are you still here?
Nah, we're gonna go now.
We're leaving now, though. That's for the best.
We learn to write by copying down the alphabet. Musicians learn to play by practicing scales. Painters learn to paint by reproducing masterpieces. Remember, even the Beatles started as a cover band. Paul McCartney has said, "I emulated Buddy Holly, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis. We all did." McCartney and his partner John Lennon became one of the greatest songwriting teams in history. But as McCartney recalls, they only started writing their own songs as a way to avoid other bands being able to play our set. As Salvador Dali said, "Those who do not want to imitate anything produce nothing."
While Hbom criticizes those who copy as lacking originality, Kleon invites us to reconsider what originality really means. It's not about conjuring something from the ether, but about transforming your influences into something unique to you. We do need to recognize that Hbom is talking about people not placing their own stamp on a work. However, I think even the blatant stealing injects some degree of the plagiarist stamp via their sensibilities and other elements. So I think in the same way Kleon says plagiarism is unavoidable, so is originality.
Take James Summerton's example. Even if he copies something word for word, he still delivers it with his inflection and through his sensibilities. He's decided what is important for him to talk about, to repeat, and what isn't. He has filtered the information through his own viewpoint, even if Hbom doesn't like it. The fact that someone deems something worth repeating at all is a creative decision. James Somerton is a human being, and every human being takes in an immense amount of information every second of their lives. And it's not limited to completed creative works. We're also taking in sensory information. Sight, smell, sound, touch. The senses are constant data streams we are aggregating in patterns and learning from. This forms experience, and we are constantly remixing that as well.
Thus, even in plagiarism, there is an unavoidable touch of originality, a complex truth about creativity. It's a spectrum, not a binary of original versus copied. No matter how replicated content is, it's also inevitably colored by interpretation, visual choices, overall presentation style, or even just deciding what is worth repeating. In this way, originality is as inherent as plagiarism. Complete unoriginality is likely just as impossible as complete originality. The elements I mentioned a moment ago contribute to a new expression of even the most blatantly plagiarized content, whether the very original creators want to admit it or not. So, why does it matter so much?
Well, at this point, I'd like to direct the viewer's attention to a joking reference to Plato on Hbomberguy's Twitter profile, where he characterizes himself as a gaming YouTuber, a media critic, and a philosopher king.
While I am certainly not telling you that Hbomberguy wants you to seriously think he is a member of the Platonic Guardian class, he does very much want to maintain a clear line between those who create and those who imitate, a boundary between himself, the real creator, and the fake creators. Consumers, really. These consumers are just expressing things they've consumed and getting treated like real creators. And while he may not want you to see him as a member of the Platonic Guardian class, Hbomberguy sees himself as a member of the Platonic Guardian class.
Hbomberguy paints plagiarism as a dishonest act by individuals trying to fill an existential void particular to them, one he doesn't personally deal with.
I feel like I know who I am and how to live my life, and that makes me feel happy and somewhat complete. And the source footage is clearly labeled, "Are they gay?"
Except he absolutely does have a god hole. We all face a void in a world built the way ours is. In capitalism, creative work is ultimately not valued for its artistic vision, but for its potential to sell. Yes, creativity is a component of this, but it may become necessary, for one reason or another, for a creative person to tailor their work to fit what sells, losing touch with their original ideas either in part or in whole. The creator's bond with their work weakens, and success is measured by sales or gamified social engagement, not by personal fulfillment or artistic value. As Hbom attempts to make the issue existential rather than one born of material conditions,
there's a little bit of nothing in all of us.
He naturalizes intellectual property law, which plays a crucial role in people's acceptance of the commodification of creativity.
Internet video as a business is at odds with internet video as a medium, dare I say, an art form. Put the gun down. This gives me a chance to respond to the most common question about plagiarism on the internet, which is, why should we care? Does it really matter in the grand scheme if a review of Octopath Traveler or 28 Days Later is stolen? If you think that, you should try extruding that logic a bit further until it reaches the pain receptors of your brain. Internet video isn't a silly playground where teens pretend to be scared of horror games anymore. It's a business. There is real money to be made in this space, or so the emails from the World of Tanks guys keep telling me. So it's definitely worth interrogating the fact people's work is being exploited in these money-making endeavors.
Interestingly, at the outset of his video, Hbom illustrates a key point. Intellectual property laws often fail to protect small creators.
When I saw it, I wanted to file immediately. My attorney said, forget it, man. He said, 90% of all plagiarism suits, the plaintiff loses. Besides, these guys will kill you. You'll never work in this town again.
They spend years finding a lawyer willing to sue a giant television conglomerate, despite the cost and the possibility of being blacklisted from working in television. Okay, you know that trick video essayists use where they open on a semi-related example that sets the stage for the wider topic? It's a classic, I do it all the time. I wanted to open on a recent example of a writer winning a plagiarism lawsuit and getting their day in court. But there isn't one. This ancient case, which took place over a decade before I, and statistically you, were even born, is still the best, most recent, and almost only example. Ellison and Bova are among the few writers to ever see financial compensation for their work being stolen.
Laws are tools that the capitalist class employs to maintain and legitimize their control over resources, which we should understand to include what they've termed intellectual property. The legal system in a capitalist society is designed to protect the interests of those who own the means of production, which extends to the realm of intellectual property.
Money-making property.
But even though Hbom starts on this systemic issue, he doesn't follow through on systemic critique. He doesn't even say the words intellectual property law. Instead, he shifts focus, framing the problem as a moral failing of individuals. This move diverts attention from the bigger picture, the capitalist structures that govern and manipulate creative work. Hbom's approach, focusing on individual morality, is like trying to fix a leaking dam with a piece of flex tape. Anyone who's watched a good epoxy river table video knows it's the fastest way to stop a leak in your melamine mold. But a dam?
Focusing solely on individual cases without addressing the underlying systemic issues only benefits those at the top. Rather than criticizing property dynamics, it focuses on what is good and bad with those dynamics as a naturalized assumption, which absolutely does not help the small creators out there struggling to make their mark. Ultimately, the discussion around creativity, intellectual property, and plagiarism shouldn't really be about who's breaking the rules. It should be about who's making the rules, who benefits from them, and how they shape our understanding and valuation of creative work. And that's a conversation Hbom doesn't just neglect to engage with, he actually tells people not to engage with it.
I'm not smart enough to know what we're supposed to do about plagiarism. I think trying to fix it in any systemic way could risk making it worse. Let's imagine YouTube introduced some kind of plagiarism claim system. We'd be expecting someone at YouTube to be able to decide whether something is plagiarism or not. And I don't like the idea of YouTube having any more power than they already have.
I think Hbomberguy's insistence on this clear boundary between real creatives and fake ones reflects the competitive nature of capitalism, where rewards and recognition are distributed on a zero-sum basis, believing it to be an injustice that purely original creations don't get their due. But in this pursuit of pure originality, as Austin Kleon suggests, he's kind of chasing an illusion. The harm of plagiarism only exists because our system rewards property rather than labor. In capitalism, the rewards aren't given out for doing the work, they're given out for owning the winning work. There are, of course, rules made to create the appearance of fairness, but breaking those rules only matters if it impedes the interest of the ruling class. For Plato, and also for Hbom, if people break these rules and no one notices, they get rewarded, and that is a cosmic injustice. People operating outside their station, not knowing their place.
But if Hbomberguy isn't going to talk about intellectual property law, let's shift our focus to a YouTuber who will. White House SciComm's advisor and science YouTuber Kyle Hill recently put out a video called Suing YouTube's Science Scammers. Hill's focus on combating content scams and protecting real educational content echoes the same real versus fake creator dichotomy we've been dissecting.
I have been posting at least one sciencey thing somewhere on YouTube every single week for the last 10 years, and I can safely say I've never seen a response like I did when I posted this.
The problem is an epidemic of mis- and misleading content made to scam your attention, written and read by bots created by probably nefarious individuals for monetary gain alone.
Here, Kyle highlights the importance of not stealing content, but is completely fine with stealing Will Ferrell's performance as Ron Burgundy.
Clings to life.
He then brags about how his video enshrined him as an expert worthy of being interviewed by the BBC, you know, the British Empire's broadcasting arm. Between that and the White House SciComm's advisor thing, it's like these technocrat wannabe influencers just can't resist validation from the imperial state. Weird, right?
I got contacted by the misinformation desk at the BBC to appear in a video investigation of their own, and I highly recommend that you watch it. The video is in the description. In it, they find more examples of stolen content and scam and spam. They interview their own experts, including yours truly, and they do an experiment with kids that has some troubling results that speak to the effect of these videos on their growing brains.
Kyle asks tough questions like, won't somebody think of the children? This is how you know the issue is extremely important to everyday people, when those with a class interest in upholding intellectual property law, like, I don't know, the broadcasting arm of a major Western state, supply reasons they should care. Also, it totally isn't weird to get involved with companies whose sole purpose is to go after not platform holders, but individual creators and channels. That's always a clear sign that this whole thing isn't just about protecting the ruling class. No, it totally doesn't reinforce the legitimacy of their laws to actively use them to police real and fake creators at all. If there is anyone out there who gets turned on by sarcasm, they are bricked right now.
I even work directly with a company that exists solely to destroy these scam channels. YouTube does, of course, have a process in place to deal with stolen content, even content that tries to hide under the guise of fair use. The system is fine in theory, but easily breakable in practice. Any channel that is a YouTube partner will get a full week to simply delete the videos they had already made their money on and avoid the strike. This is where Viral DRM comes in. They are willing to file federal lawsuits, freeze Google AdSense accounts, and get entire scam channels, some with tens of millions of subscribers and tens of thousands of videos, deleted entirely. To date, Viral DRM has sued more than 70 channels, and not one of them has shown up in court. Just recently, they took down a channel with over 12 million subscribers and 240,000 videos.
You'll notice Kyle doesn't bother with the word plagiarism, though, because scam sounds a lot more like something to partner with a company to fight. But if he indeed understands optics on that level, he missed a biggie. If I were a hip YouTuber in the science space, very Reddit adjacent, I wouldn't be so quick to align myself with a company with DRM in the name. Digital rights management, after all, isn't exactly popular. Why not, you ask?
Who do you think you are? I mean, just, because you, made us rich, you think you can get free stuff? Money, good. Answer, man.
DRM technologies control how digital content, like music, movies, and software, can be used and accessed, often limiting consumers' freedom to use their legally purchased products. Users are frequently frustrated by DRM's limitations on sharing, copying, and even playing content across different devices. This can lead to a sense of unfairness, as consumers feel they don't have control over the products they've bought. With money they earned from work.
Until recently, the mere mention of DRM was swatted down as pure evil by basically everyone on the internet. But Now, managing rights digitally is apparently really cool, at least if you're an already very successful digital creator. And that's why folks like White House SciComm's advisor Kyle Hill are getting pushed by the British Broadcasting Corporation, the UK state media apparatus. That's why folks like Hbomberguy, whether they realize it or not, are getting pushed by outlets like Vulture, owned by Vox Media, which is owned by Comcast, pushed by NBC News, also owned by Comcast, and topping the list of the best video essays of 2023 by Polygon, also owned by Vox Media and therefore Comcast. Also, Comcast's 3 biggest shareholders are BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. You know, people with no interest at all in policing norms about property. This milieu of people that can't stop uploading videos about plagiarism is exactly the same thing that James Somerton, internet historian, and any of their other targets are. Just YouTubers.
When people look at your past work, they look at our stuff and they're like, oh, you guys have done some stuff on YouTube? What? YouTube, the thing where that guy recorded a video of a dead dude? YouTube, the thing my kid watches, and it's like there's that PewDiePie, and he like talks. What?
Yeah, the stigma's never left.
The stigma's never left,
and that drives these people absolutely nuts because they see themselves above that rabble. Why isn't there something that separates the real creators from these consumers in sheep's clothing?
This becomes extremely glaring once you've seen how the other side lives. At the last VidCon I went to, like 4 years ago, I was taking an Uber and a bunch of people came in it with me because we were all going to the same place. A bunch of big YouTubers who I don't know super well, including really massive one, like way more important than me, you know? And we were all just making small talk, and I made a joke that was actually quite funny about the topic we were talking about. And this big YouTuber, she laughed and took out her phone and tweeted it. She heard my joke and just casually went, oh, I'll have that. And it became her joke. And she just took it.
How niggas gonna just come by and just sign their name on someone else's shit all after the fact? Try to steal my shine!
People really liked the joke too, which felt kind of good, but not really.
You know, Riley, the moon steals its shine from the sun, and no one ever gets the two confused. Take it as a compliment.
And what are you gonna do, complain?
I'm the artist. That's right, people. I know. Amazing, ain't it? So young. So young.
And that was my Uber, too. I paid money to have one of my jokes stolen by a multimillionaire.
To me, it looks like H-Bomb believes this YouTuber, whoever she is, has been afforded the wrong station. He deserves what she has. He deserves the credit. He deserves the love. He deserves not to have a godhole. But sadly, the bad people out there are allowed to build followings by repeating things they didn't come up with. While I might seem like I'm focusing a lot on these guys, H-Bomb in particular, they seem to really focus on them. They can't help but make it about themselves, whether it's Kyle Hill's touting of validation from various Western governments or H-Bomb mad that someone took his joke. Their analysis and advocacy revolve around themselves and their personal grievances with other individuals. Here's the difference in my analysis. Who cares? These guys actually don't matter at all. If it weren't them, it would be someone else, because the real issue is incentives and rewards.
I don't even know if I should be making this video. I was just trying to double check 2 or 3 old plagiarism accusations, and I ended up finding a whole bunch more, and I have functionally made a drama video about some guy. And worse, if this video goes up and is monetized and gets views, I have been paid, financially rewarded for making this. I don't find that acceptable. Especially not when the story is really about people who were never compensated for their work being stolen. So to make sure I have no financial incentive to make a video like this again, I'm going to be dividing any of the ad revenue this video makes among the creators James stole from.
good guy Harry here to admit there is a financial incentive driving what gets popular and therefore what gets made. See, that's the fun part. While he signals very hard that he's making the right moral choice to pass the pay he gets for his property, the video, forward by admitting that he, the owner of that property, has to choose to pay creative laborers on an individual basis. No matter how disgusted he acts about this, he's only highlighting the limitations of his critique. And the thing is, he's not even the big owner. The platform owners have the real control. It's just that establishing these property relations as something for the people who actually care to get fixated on and obsessed with, he's obscuring the real issue, the big owners.
These financial incentives don't matter when he's claiming the problem is people's god hole. They only matter when he has to show why his drama video isn't icky and that he's still a good boy. Hbom and others like him likely don't see their actions as reinforcing system-justifying ideologies and might even be offended by such a suggestion. After all, he decided to do the right thing. But doing the right thing when one is incentivized to do the wrong thing means you are in a position to opt out of these incentives. Not all of us have nearly 20,000 people paying us to make 1 or 2 videos a year. Did you know he made about $6,000 a month back when he had about 1/10 of the patrons? So if he makes 10 times that now, that's $720,000 a year to donate the 50 to 60K he made in ad revenue on this 13 million view video that has caused a spike in new Patreon subscriptions. I think a lot of Hbom's viewers couldn't afford to do the right thing in this same way if they were given an opportunity to make a cool 50 G's themselves.
And that isn't to say, Hbom needs to donate all of the money from his thousands of new Patreon subscribers to the victims of James Somerton on a monthly basis in order to be consistent. It's to say, that's an absurd standard to hold people to, and I don't hold Hbom to it. He shouldn't either. Instead, he should focus on systemic critique of the incentives and reward structure that the capitalist mode is defined by and thus perpetuates.
But those view statistics are the only reason I mention these guys individually anyways. Hbom has gotten over 13 million views on his video as of this writing, and Kyle Hill has over 3 million views on his 2 videos. That's a lot of people tuning in for ideology.
But like I said, these guys didn't even come up with this stuff. They aren't philosopher kings, they're just foot soldiers, influencers taking on the aesthetic of intellectuals, influentials. Guys fighting to distinguish their silver souls from those disgusting bronze soul common people, reinforcing Plato's ideological justification for class society. You know, the idea that things would be better if the right people were in the right places. Justice. And this justice is what justifies rewarding ownership of value-creating property instead of rewarding doing the work. And we can tell that plagiarism isn't about falsifying someone else's creative labor, because if we were rewarding based on labor, then the content flat out doesn't matter. This would allow art to flourish because failure wouldn't destroy a person. It wouldn't be a gamble of both time and money to make art. Further, the art itself would be appreciated for what it is, rather than based on some form of metrics, box office numbers, sales. But I don't want to sell you on some utopian endgame. Instead, I want to quickly look at an existing phenomenon as a close analog. Memes.
Memes. The DNA of the soul.
Memes are inherently derivative and collaborative, thriving on replication, transformation, and circulation. Memes are not about individual credit or private ownership. They are a communal form of expression, constantly reshaped and recontextualized by collective input. The incentives and rewards that create the harm of plagiarism just aren't there. Because of this, with memes, the traditional concept of plagiarism dissolves. Memes are not bound by the same capitalistic incentives that drive much of content creation today. They are not typically created for profit or market success, and in fact, if they are, that's when they're most likely to be abject failures in terms of enjoyment and circulation. Instead, memes are a form of cultural conversation and thrive outside of conventional market dynamics. They are not commodities to be bought and sold. They're shared cultural artifacts that evolve over time through communal participation.
Now there's a pretty meme. Exquisite.
And it's funny how once those incentives and rewards disappear, the attitude generally found around memes is the one that arises. There's no more reverence for property, intellectual or otherwise. Enforcement of these laws is totally impractical, and there's no mainstream discussion about the ethics of memes, at least in this context. So suddenly, all that matters is whether it's actually funny or relatable. Everyone benefits because it's a means to express something, and that's all it is. That's it. That's the entire purpose. But if memes hint at what it would look like if creativity transcended capitalist property dynamics, what happens when we introduce a new player to the stage? One that is neither creator nor consumer in the traditional sense, but something else.
Artificial intelligence is when a computer executes tasks previously considered exclusive to human intellectual processes. AI can process large amounts of data in ways that appear more efficient, faster, and even more extensive than a human being. The goal of AI is to recognize patterns, make decisions, and judge like humans, at least to some extent. But beyond simple definitions, what exactly is AI? It's more than just code and algorithms. In a way, it's a mirror that reflects how we, as humans, think and create. Just like people, AI works by remixing everything. It takes vast amounts of data, text, images, even sounds, and recombines them to create something new, or at least something that seems new.
This should sound familiar, given that I spent a whole bunch of time talking about the book Steal Like an Artist, about how nothing is truly the work of any one person or truly original in the individualist sense. Now, this might feel a bit uncomfortable for some. We're pretty cozy with the notion that creativity is a human thing, a process machines can't tread. But when we peek under the hood, the mechanics of how AI creates this remixing and recombining of data, it's not fundamentally different from how we craft our ideas. So, what's the real distinction?
To put it philosophically, AI only aggregates knowing, while humans aggregate being. To put it in a Marxist sense, AI aggregates on a metaphysical basis with specific, unconnected, unchanging information in repose and at prompt. Humans, on the other hand, continuously aggregate a dialectical, connected, fluid, and ongoing consciousness, never stationary, always changing. AI's dataset isn't the vibrant, chaotic whirlwind of human life. An individual person's dataset is this vast, ever-shifting sea of sensory input. We pull from the world around us, our senses, our experiences. AI can't pull from the scent of rain on concrete, the crackle of leaves underfoot, or the heat of anger rising. AI's reservoir comprises finished works, completed texts, images, and sounds, all fixed in their final form. Human creativity is a rolling total that can't be stopped as long as human beings exist. Each moment blooming with new sensations. Every second informed by the accumulated memories of a lifetime and all those who came before. And this is in flux. We are constantly changing, growing, and learning.
Even as we speak, you and I, we're not the same people we were even a minute ago.
I can go from flaccid to erect in a moment's notice. He can. I've seen it. Buddy, you're seeing it. You're all seeing it, because I'm doing it right now. Flaccid, erect. Flaccid, erect. Flaccid, erect. Not too hard, not too soft.
AI, on the other hand, is a creature of stasis. drawing from a static pool of what has already been created. It doesn't feel the rush of a new idea sparked by a fresh experience because it cannot experience things. Its data is a snapshot, a freeze frame of human output without the context of how it came to be. So the difference is the nature of the data itself, the depth, the richness, the context. Human beings draw from a living, breathing world, an endless stream of now and then, here and there. AI, meanwhile, can only draw from what we've already distilled into bits and bytes.
But this isn't to stigmatize AI. AI is an amazing tool. It allows a creative person to outsource some of the more tedious and difficult aspects of creation and ultimately enables them to focus on what creativity truly is: editing. Editing is the soul of the creative process. It's where we make the choices that define our work, where everything that came before becomes something new. Do we follow the rules? Do we break them? Do we cling to a vision, or do we let caprice guide us in new directions? This is where intuition, experience, and that ever-changing stream of sensory input come into play. Sure, AI can assemble and draft, but it is the human who sculpts and defines. We are the ones who breathe life into the work, who instill it with meaning and emotion. We decide what stays, what goes, what works, what doesn't. At its core, creativity is about making choices that reflect the self, the society, and whatever you consider the soul. Again, AI is a tool to assist in that. But also, no tool exists in a vacuum.
AI, like smartphones, computers, cars, conveyor belts, levers, wheels, and tons of other automation that came before it, is part of a larger economic system, one that is set up to reap benefits based on different relationships to the means of production. There is great potential for tools like AI to liberate us from drudgery, but in the capitalist framework, it's a double-edged sword. Tools are meant to serve humanity, to lessen our load.
I have to have my tools!
But as automation takes hold, we inevitably face crisis. The wealth created by the subordinate class, the workers, is gradually siphoned off to the owning class because workers receive a wage or salary rather than the total value of their labor. It's surplus value in action. Workers produce more than what they're compensated for, and the excess lines the pockets of the capitalists. This gradually depletes the wealth of the subordinate class and eventually makes it more difficult to operate in the consumer market. Further, as capitalists invest more in automation, the human labor component of the commodity, where value comes from, decreases. This leads to a contradiction, a self-defeating cycle where the drive for profit leads to its own demise. Employ more automation, get less human labor, and watch profit margins thin out. To compensate, capitalists produce more, but that excess can't be sold because the subordinate class doesn't have enough money. It's a crisis built from the contradiction of declining value amid expanding production. The capitalist response, as critiqued by Hbomberguy in 1934's Fascism and Social Revolution, is to attempt to scale back production and consumption rather than resolve the contradictions of capitalism. We can see that now, on the general level, in the degrowth movement, but we can see the same thing in the content creation landscape, particularly on platforms like YouTube.
So with YouTube, it's partly about the sheer abundance of content, sure, but if we're talking about leveraged consumers, let's consider their currency in this marketplace. Attention. Attention is currency in the marketplace of ideas. I feel like I've said that somewhere before. Anyway, we've hit a saturation point. Imagine an ocean of content, vast and unending, and here we are, the viewers, trying to slurp it up with a bendy straw. It's a tidal wave of explainers, vlogs, tutorials, cat compilations, me shaking my dick around in an American flag onesie. You name it. It's all there. Yay. All of it is chasing after consumers with content queues longer than the line to see Taylor Swift and her sudden, unaccounted for breasts. No one will ever have the time to watch all of it. Never. It's like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet, a good one, only to find that you've been given a 5-minute time limit and you have to eat with chopsticks. Fate is a fickle mistress indeed.
As I said a moment ago, the options are to resolve the contradictions, effectively ending the zero-sum basis for rewards and instead rewarding labor, or attempting to take something off the consumer's plate. I think this predicament has led to two primary responses among content creators. The first, which I call the sad reaction, is where creators scale back or quit because they feel defeated by the diminishing returns on their efforts in a saturated market. The second reaction is actually what we covered in part 2, what I call the mad reaction, which involves creators calling out plagiarism or AI use, essentially attempting to purge the market of what they see as illegitimate competition.
But the limited pool of consumer attention is a constraint that exists only due to capitalism's imposition of it. And because the reward is distributed on a zero-sum basis to those who own the winning property, the incentive is to make winning easier. The incentive that leads people to try and take out the plagiarists is the same incentive that causes plagiarism, getting to the food trough before it's empty. If the reward was distributed entirely based on labor, automation could, and most likely would, be humanity's ally. But in the clutches of capitalism's zero-sum, property-based rewards game, it becomes a specter haunting the subordinate class. It promises a future of leisure and creative freedom, but for whom? If the wealth is funneled upwards and the workers' share diminishes, we're left with a system teetering on the brink of its inherent contradictions. All forms of automation, and thus also AI, can potentially liberate and unleash humanity's creativity, but they mainly seem to constrict us in new ways unless the system's contradictions can be resolved. So, why aren't we working on that?
Well, who decides what AI uses? Who curates the collection that AI draws from to create? The choices made in training AI are steeped in power. These decisions are made by the people and institutions that own these AI systems and run the platforms through which most will access them for use. They determine what AI learns and consequently a lot about what it creates. In this way, they're, much like the philosopher kings of Plato's Republic, endlessly finding new ways to project shadows for the lessers to interact with.
And let's not ignore the elephant in the room, intellectual property law. It's ostensibly there to protect creators, but again, who does it really serve? Now, we don't necessarily have to stick with art for examples. We could talk about inventors, restaurateurs, or some other service providers, but I think it's probably easier and more interesting to focus on some kind of artistic endeavor. So, consider an indie game developer, a small-time creator pouring their heart and soul into a unique game concept.
They release their creation into the world only for elements of their game to be co-opted by a major corporation making its own games. This is totally inevitable. What works in art is emulated by other people. This is how genres begin. Go back far enough, and there were no platformers, no fighting games, no first-person shooters, none of it. At some point, they were all firsts. That said, in capitalism, rewards are given out on a zero-sum basis. Nintendo isn't paid for all the non-Mario platformers. Id Software isn't paid for every time people make a first-person shooter that isn't Doom.
That would be impractical to litigate, even for the most financially solvent company, given the size and breadth of the competition, even for Nintendo. a company worth $64 billion. Sony has also released platformers, and they're worth almost double that, $114 billion. Microsoft has also released platformers, and they're worth $2 trillion. Hell, they own id Software, and for whatever reason, they aren't demanding a fee for everyone who makes a first-person shooter. So if Nintendo don't do it because Nintendo can't do it, why would someone expect the indie developer to have recourse when their ideas make their way into bigger companies' games? And this isn't a rarity. It's how things normally work in a system that prioritizes protection of the owning capitalist class. In our current structure, intellectual property law is less about safeguarding creativity and more about controlling who profits from it and how. But again, why aren't we working on changing that?
There's another dimension to consider, too: AI as a service commodity. Here, we find a paradox. Most of the creators who use AI tools are not self-hosting them and are, therefore, also consumers, blurring the lines between production and consumption. As a service, AI has been sold under the guise of democratization. It's represented as a ladder to climb the creative hierarchy to unlock one's potential.
To truly unlock human potential. My team and I, so the HR team, we look at ourselves as HR professionals, HR team, HR tasks, meeting with the HR team. As an HR person, where do I start in all this? A readiness test for HR to focus on the work that can unlock human potential. So AI, that stands for artificial intelligence.
You too could be a successful creator with AI. Just use our AI product designed to bridge the gap between the creative haves and have-nots. This is where echoes of Hbomberguy's critique resonate. The real and the fake, the creator and imposter. Well, it seems like a distinction that's about the quality of someone's work. It's really a narrative that serves those who dictate the inputs, those who curate the data sets, those who control the platforms. The interesting thing is that these platform holders with all the informational control are the ones telling creators that they can, while the real creators are telling them that they can't or even that they shouldn't. If you use AI, you're not really a creator. AI is plagiarism. If you use Photoshop for corrections, you're not a real photographer. That compromises the integrity of the composition. If you use samples in your beats, if you cover a song, you're not really a musician. You're a poser. If you use recipe books, you're not a true chef. You're just following instructions. Well, there's a reason people use cookbooks. It's because people like food that isn't just random shit thrown together. You don't just naturally know this stuff either, and while I'm not necessarily defending plagiarism as a commercial enterprise, a lot of the time it's how people learn a craft. And increasingly, people don't get to make mistakes, fail, or do wrong and learn from it privately anymore. You have to post it.
Every tool we've ever used has been a stepping stone on the path to learning and development. The wheel, the printing press, the computer. Each one has extended our capabilities and transformed our societies. AI will be a part of that lineage. And the thing is, content made by simply asking AI to make it flat out doesn't compare to something made by humans. But that doesn't negate its potential as a tool to help people develop their knowledge, skills, and even work. Still, today's real creators and their followers like to say that using AI is a shortcut, a cheat, or even plagiarism itself. They constantly air their disdain for those who dare use these tools, a gatekeeping chorus that chants, "If you use some kind of aid, you're not a creator. I am the real creator." But this is hypocrisy. Their creativity is a remix as well. And it's often more than just hypocrisy. It's a deliberate tactic to maintain the exclusivity of true creativity, a way to keep the gates tightly locked to maintain their success.
It's a way to keep her germs, because AI took our germs.
They took our jobs. They took our jobs. They took your jobs.
Yes, the platforms that champion AI as a democratizing force in creativity do often perpetuate a culture that debases the human touch. But what makes this more derivative work so unappealing to these so-called real creators?
As technology progresses, the methods of plagiarism are getting stranger and more complex. The hot new tool in the stealing tools box is generative AI, like ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, or Midjourney, which can produce new art or words on command using a process known as stealing. Sorry, that's an oversimplification. The process is called, complicated stealing.
Well, the fact that they meet the incentives faster and with less effort, but nets the same reward before the quote-unquote real creators can. That reward is given out on a zero-sum basis. If you're late, it's slim pickings. And nowadays, late simply means takes your time and does due diligence.
It's really not hard to see how bypassing those things and scooping up the rewards bothers real creators, but interestingly enough, the control of the AI platforms that incentivizes this derivative culture of stealing is the same thing the real creators want to preserve because they think it will fix the problem. The mode of ownership and the morals, ethics, and laws that justify and enforce it. And that brings us full circle. The platform owners telling us AI is your stepping stone to creativity. They're offering us access to a version of AI that they own and control. They don't care about democratizing creativity at all. They care that creators use their services. And that brings up the deeper issue, class rule.
It's not just about who's creating what with AI, but about understanding what AI really is and what we can trust it to do. Hosted generative AI is trained by or under the direction of the people who own it. We, the people who don't own those platforms, need to grasp the implications of the data sets they're crafting. Relying solely on AI is like placing unwavering trust in a single media outlet, say MSNBC or Fox News. Sure, to some extent, what comes out of it is rooted in reality, but there's always an underlying agenda, a specific worldview shaping the narrative. A huge pillar of capitalist class rule is information control. If they own the AI platform, no matter what we do with the AI, it's pulling from what they have chosen to train it with. Metaphorically speaking, they control the air we breathe.
This is why the discussion of plagiarism has been amplified and pushed. It does work as a great distraction. Like, that's a big part of it. But it isn't merely a red herring. It's much more.
This debate is the embodiment of an ideology that not only distracts, but also justifies the inherent contradictions of the system. It's a strategic misdirection, keeping the focus on individual actions and moral judgments, rather than on the systemic flaws and power imbalances that shape the entire landscape of creativity and ownership. The plagiarism discussion, as we have seen it play out, has been amplified and pushed because it helps partisanize several issues, artificial intelligence included, along a line that isn't class.
ChatGPT's one truly impressive feature is how well it enables plagiarism. You could just paste a bunch of stolen stuff you got from Wikipedia or someone else's video in there and tell it to rewrite it so it sounds different.
If the argument is about what kind of creativity is legitimate and who among creatives is genuine, then it's not about intellectual property law and the capitalist mode of ownership.
The moral panic of genuine creativity versus derivative crap by way of plagiarism serves as an excellent decoy, but grasping the underlying dynamics at play is also a necessary step towards the next stage of human development. And to demonstrate, the last thing we're going to talk about today is Pokemon. Because Pokemon evolve, right? Yeah. That's not why we're talking about Pokemon.
I wanna make a survival game, including Pokemon. But also I wanna have guns, cause I think that would be cool.
On Friday, January 19th, 2024, Japanese studio Pocket Pair released Pal World, a survival game with the addition of some Pokemon-inspired art and mechanics. It sold 2 million units in its first 24 hours, millions more since, and immediately got very positive reviews from its players. As of this writing, 179,000 people have reviewed the game, and 94% of those reviews are positive.
The negative reviews look like this.
While the game is fun, the creators are far too happy to endorse the use of AI, NFTs, and GPT-4, and as such, I refuse to support them. Could have been fun, but learning it's AI-generated garbage. The character art is pretty ugly, and the pals are bland, so I guess it's not super surprising. The writing from NPCs is laughably edgy too, which isn't horrible, but just eye-rolling, hoping to get a refund. This game was apparently made with generative AI, which sucks, and wished it was advertised. This game has potential, but due to the AI, I can't recommend it. Don't make the same mistake I did. I bought it and played it 6 hours before I realized the people behind it are serious pieces of trash. NFT and crypto bros with previous scam titles who use art gen. I don't consider the fact they're targeting Game Freak as a good enough excuse for using and normalizing AI. This game is really giving me some uneasy feelings about how willing people are to overlook blatant art theft and generative AI use in games as long as they are quote-unquote fun. If you can't refund it and didn't know, don't feel guilty. To everyone else, it's not really worth it. I promise. The most shameless AI bro scam to come to gaming thus far. The pals are clearly AI generated based on a Pokemon prompt. The CEO has posts on X/ their blog from years ago discussing how you could use generative AI to make new Pokemon that you couldn't tell were fake, how you can use AI to bypass copyright, etc. The hot cold meter is stolen directly from Breath of the Wild, as in the HUD element is literally just a traced copy of the one from Breath of the Wild. The wanted meter is in the same position and using the same style as the one from Red Dead Redemption 2. The survival mechanics and other aspects of the UI are directly lifted from Ark, and it's all rolled up into an early access Unreal Engine asset flip. The company is notorious for making early access games and failing to support them in the long term as well. I understand that Ark, but with Pokemon and guns, is a neat concept, and people have every right to be annoyed at Nintendo and Game Freak for how little effort they put into their own Pokemon games. But the answer isn't to support games that are clearly asset flip, AI-generated, IP theft scams that steal from the hard work put in by actually creative people. Turning off motion blur doesn't actually turn off motion blur, and it hurts my eyes.
So, a small, very vocal minority of people clearly believe these AI bros aren't real creators and shouldn't be making video games. Interestingly enough, a number of them even conceded to having fun with the game. That one guy played it for 6 hours and then found out the developers were the baddies. The game then gave him some uneasy feelings about how willing people are to overlook blatant art theft and generative AI use in games as long as they are fun. Yeah, he changed his mind when he found out their previous games are scam titles that use AI art gen. Sure, the game is fun, but that isn't why I play games. I play them as an expression of my moral positions. Anyways, there is one thing I do agree with from all these Pal World Steam reviews. They should fix that motion blur thing. I bet that's super annoying.
Coverage of the Pal World backlash indicates it started on social media. You know, the same way Hbomb's producer crowdsourced a real versus fake creator list. Remember the sarcastic quip about how that would probably remain civil? Well, it doesn't. It didn't with James Somerton, and it isn't with Pal World. It also ties back in with the idea of no longer being able to learn and fuck up in private. You have to post it, whether that means literally posting it on social media or learning on the job. Because apparently, one of the Pal World developers previously worked at a convenience store.
Oh, some pleb is breaking in the Creators Country Club. Really not sticking to your proper station there. A true cosmic injustice. Must be cheating.
With all of this, what we're seeing is fear. Fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of losing control. But that's the thing. The debates around this are set up to divert us away from any means we, the people, could gain some kind of control.
And I just gotta say this, the people who are yelling that Pal World is evil are probably the same people who were loudly and publicly recognizing the overworking of employees at video game companies commonly referred to as crunch, a serious issue that needs to change. And it's not like some problem of missing a dance recital or something, not that that isn't important, but there are cases of it where people have been literally worked to death. Pocket Pair, the developers behind Pal World, is actually a company that's trying to fix that. Now, I don't think that a single company actually #dobettering is going to do a whole lot to the industry itself, but at least they're putting their money where their mouth is. Here's what their careers page says.
The era of making games while suffering is over. At Pocket Pair, we value not only users, but also developers who make games very much. Overtime is basically non-existent. Attendance hours are also flexible. With a focus on in-house development, we have a relaxed development process. We also have comprehensive welfare benefits, creating an environment where game development can be done comfortably and with a relaxed mindset, instead of competing with other companies in terms of quality. We are pioneering a unique path with unique ideas.
Man, this studio has really given me some uneasy feelings about how willing people are to overlook blatant art theft and generative AI use in companies as long as they're quote-unquote treating employees better. In all seriousness, that's exactly what people should want to hear a game company say. But thanks to this ideological battle about creative authenticity, the concern for people isn't the workers' labor, as they may claim, it's intellectual property. Protecting the big, established capitalists' intellectual property.
All this argument over the standards, and no one is asking who gets to set the standards, and more importantly, who benefits from these standards. The irony is that while we argue over who's a real creator, we're missing the bigger picture, the consolidation of control. AI is not the problem here. The capitalist mode of ownership is. And it is supported by unofficial ideologies like ethics and official ones like laws. It's supported by focusing on individuals and their merit or authenticity rather than a systemic critique of the zero-sum basis of incentives and rewards and why it is that's how things work. The lack of questions about ownership amid the endless sea of calling out individuals for stealing and the moral panic about automation reflect a lack of understanding of the necessity of reevaluating legal, ethical, and economic frameworks in the face of the unstoppable march of history. Intellectual property law isn't a permanent fixture. It's not natural, it's not inherent, it is simply a concept. And the way it's written, it eventually does expire and works move into the public domain. This is because copyright protections have roots in an earlier phase of capitalism, a time when monopoly was looked at as a preventable phenomenon, an exhibition of the hubris that marked that era. Although imperial monopolists have managed to extend copyrights well beyond the 14 years industrial era idealists initially set forward, it has always been a delay tactic rather than a reversal. It took 95 years, but Steamboat Willie era Mickey Mouse is now in the public domain. This shift has been met with resistance from established media structures, circulating narratives around various interpretations of Mickey, diminishing the character's legacy. Obviously, a lot of people hold Mickey sacred, but many don't, so this isn't enough to stop anyone from using Mickey or considering those uses legitimate. This is where ethics comes in. Everyone wants to be moral and ethical, or at least seen as such. By incentivizing and promoting discussion centered specifically on ethics, the conversation is steered away from a critical examination of power structures. We should have learned that lesson 10 years ago with #Gamergate, where discontent over being ripped off and lied to was morphed under the guise of ethics into a bunch of frivolous culture war that simply diverted people away from any discussion of real power. But here we are in 2024 with the same influencers mobilizing their same fandoms to fight with other fandoms and change nothing about the way the world works.
Well, that's just great. Good to see the project's back on track. The train track to successfully defeating basic critical theory. Cheers, guys. Seriously, that's how much he drinks at a time. Go and check his videos. Fucking seriously.
Plato's Republic, a blueprint for a society governed not by the many, but by the few who have deemed themselves most wise and capable, is smack dab at the middle of all this, so let's bring it home. AI doesn't have to be a threat or a crutch. It's just a brush in the hands of a painter, a chisel in the hands of a sculptor, a pen in the hands of a writer. Tools.
Tools! Tools!
And it's time to recognize creativity for what it truly is. A collective human legacy, richer and more complex than any single story, any single creator, any single class. If we focus primarily on individuals not doing creativity right, we miss the larger picture. The truth is, creativity has never been about doing things right. It's about expression and pushing the boundaries of what we know. If we concentrate solely on whether someone is using AI correctly or whether someone else is respecting the sacred lines of originality, we play right into the hands of those who are actually pulling the strings. Much like contemporary philosopher kings dictating the shape of truth and reality, today's digital overlords curate and control the flow of content, deciding not just who gets to see what, but who gets to create, how they create, and who benefits. When a large corporation takes ideas from a small creator, it's seen as the natural order of things, the way of progress. Yet, when a smaller creator borrows from the giants, they're met with the full force of intellectual property law, a system seemingly designed to keep the small, well, small. Hbomberguy's video starts off by acknowledging this, but he doesn't question it. Instead, with his sharp distinctions between creators and imposters, he reinforces abstract lines between who has creativity and who doesn't. That's why I used his video to talk about this. It's a popular, long, and supposedly creator-friendly rehash of Plato's Republic. The true danger of these class rule justifying ideologies is how they compel us to accept the current rulers as deserving, as the best among us. Meritocracy, the myth of the metals, the creator versus imposter narrative. And ultimately, the new obsession with plagiarism is extremely tied up in the hysteria around artificial intelligence. Despite what they might think, the real creators' crusade to defend the sanctity of original creation is ultimately against the democratization of their craft. Pocket Pair, the Pal World developers, is not a large company. it had trouble finding a developer in Japan who knew shooting mechanics. By chance, their small team came across a 20-year-old part-time convenience store employee with no industry experience and just a middle school diploma. And that was the right person for the job. In this respect, Pocket Pair kind of sounds like a utopian dream, a company of scrappy, even uneducated but passionate underdogs whose game validates the idea that anyone can make a game, anyone can make art. And while I agree with that ideal, clearly not everybody does. But I also think that's why Platonic elitists hate Pal World. They hate the idea that their so-called originality might go unrewarded and unrecognized. But in following the game of incentives as they are, they're ultimately working in service of the sovereignty of the biggest owners, driving attention from the consolidation of power along class lines. Again, the plagiarism issue is capitalist in nature. It is the ethical rather than the legal defense of capitalist property relations, and it justifies a mode where rewards are given out on a zero-sum basis to the owners of value-creating property. If the reward was given out for labor, then the content is totally irrelevant. The only reason the content matters at all, in terms of possible harm anyways, is capitalist/bourgeois property relations. If we look beyond the shadows that they're putting on the walls for us, we can see the truth. The ruling class's power is contingent, not inherent. Their rule is not validated by nature or merit. It's justified by ideologies that convince us not to challenge, not to question, not to reimagine what could be. People think gatekeeping is about how much you know, the validity of your actions or work, or even how big a fan you are, but it's ultimately about preserving an elite group's interests. Always. And you'll also always find these silver soul enforcers fooling themselves, thinking they're part of the gold soul philosopher king class. But the real rulers look down on them the same as the rest of us. So ultimately, we have to stop chastising each other for being derivative. Everyone and everything is derivative. If we hope to change anything, we need to move beyond the reactionary critiques of who is a real creator and who isn't. We've got to look towards the mechanisms of control that restrict creative freedom. Plato envisioned a society led by the enlightened few, but the true nature of creativity, as we've seen, is far more democratic, a tapestry woven by many hands. Your hands. Where the power should be. I'm Peter Coffin, philosophy disliker, and this documentary has been very important.
Well, Plato's a bitch, he's a big fat bitch, he's the biggest bitch in the whole wide world. He's a stupid bitch, if there ever was a bitch, he's a bitch to all the boys and girls. On Monday's a bitch, on Tuesday's a bitch, on Wednesday through Saturday he's a bitch, and on Sunday, just to be different, he's a super kink on mayor biatch. Have you ever read The Republic? It's the dumbest shit in the whole wide world. Plato is a bitch and he has stupid heads. Bitch. He's a stupid bitch. Plato's a bitch, yes, he's such a stupid bitch.